Hello, hello, and welcome once again to a Beatles program that we call Things We Said Today. This is a weekly show in which we talk about anything and everything Beatles, the past, the present, sometimes even the future. You never know from week to week what topic we're going to cover. I'm Ken Michaels. I'm one of the four regular co-hosts of the show. You might know me from my other Beatles program, a syndicated show called Every Little Thing. The Beatles, Every Little Thing, that is, being joined by my other three co-hosts. First of all, we have a contributing writer for Billboard magazine, also Access.com, that being Steve Marinucci. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Ken. Hello, everyone.
Also, we have the senior writer and editor for Beatle Fan magazine. Since the very beginning of the magazine back in the late 70s, that's Al Sussman. Hi, Al.
Hi, Ken. Hello there, everybody.
And also we have a freelance writer and musicologist and also writer for Beatle Fan, that being Alan Kozin. Hi, Alan.
Hey, Ken. Hello, everyone.
On today's show, we're being joined by two very special guests. And quite a while back, we actually interviewed one of these special guests here when the show was just Steve and me. We have Lefty and Zeek Weekling of the Weekings here to join us for to talk about their brand new album coming out in November called Studio 2. Hello, guys.
Hi. We're happy to be speaking with you.
Hello, gentlemen.
Well, yeah, I'm on behalf of Zeke, who just walked out of the room to go to the bathroom for a second. I'll represent him.
That's a first. We've
TMI.
Yeah, we've never had somebody say that.
Your introduction was taking a little while, and he thought that, it was time to, drain the main bank. But he's back.
I'm feeling much better now.
Okay.
Good to know.
All right. So for anyone who's not familiar with the band and also the first album, which we covered earlier in one of our shows when it was just Steve and me, the whole concept behind this band was to record original material that harkens back to early Beatles sounds and sounds of the 60s, and also mix that with rare material that the Beatles either recorded and didn't release themselves or gave to other artists. And you're continuing along the same lines on the new album. So what gave you guys the idea to do this concept? And the album called Studio 2 is obviously named after the studio at Abbey Road where the Beatles did so many of their recordings. Talk about how that album got started.
Well, actually, Studio 2 was named after the studio in which we recorded the album. That's what it was. That's why we named it that.
That's the name of the album. We got together. There's a thing that we were doing for years, the Beatles Bash, and it was like a large show with a lot of different performers. But it morphed into this. The rhythm section ended up being the four of us. So it's a quartet consisting of Zeke, myself, Lefty, and Smokestack Weekling and Rocky Weekling. And so as a quartet, we started to realize that we really enjoyed playing music as a quartet. One year we focused on the first two Beatle albums and the arranging of just those four guys was fabulous. And we realized it as we picked the songs apart and really studied them. And it's like, hey, this all makes sense. This is a really well choreographed arrangement. Every song was. So we said, well, let's be a quartet. And, we're not the wig wearing kind of guys, but we said, well, let's take some other gigs. Let's take some gigs as a quartet, and not the big show, the small rock show. So we started to do that. And then we said, well, let's make a CD. Like, let's make a little CD that we could sell at our gigs.
Merch CD.
Yeah, and then we said, well, let's record some of these songs that some Beatles songs.
Well, I picked up this album, a vinyl record at a local store that was entitled "The Songs That Lennon and McCartney Gave Away," and said, we could take these songs and sort of retool them, imagining how they would have been done if the Beatles had actually done them, because they were done by various artists. So we that was our original idea. And then Lefty said, well, we're going to do that. Let's do some originals too, because we had original songs that were in the same vein. So that's what we did.
Yeah, there are. I do remember bumping into. In fact, I think I had a couple of CDs from other, Beatle bands, tribute bands of, these groups trying to cop note for note what the Beatles did. And invariably, when you hear, Nowhere Man or She Loves You or whatever done by anybody else, as you're listening to it, you say, well, this is not as good as, this is not the record that I loved as a kid.
Yep.
So the idea was, well, maybe, and it was Zeek, really, as I recall, maybe it was that record, but the idea of let's do Beatles songs that they didn't do. And so that's what we did. We looked, and we continue to look for rare Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison songs. And so we did it. The first album, which everybody calls monophonic, on Gem Records and Tapes, was half of the album were early Beatles songs that were not recorded by the Beatles. And this new album has four, I think,
Four songs.
Lennon, McCartney, and
We tried to dig harder. On the second album, we went for things that were even more rare. The first album had songs that you can find that were done by the other artists, but this second album, nobody had.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. It's songs that I didn't actually know. Maybe you guys would know, being the Beatles nerds.
Ken knew. Ken knew.
Yeah, Ken did.
Yeah.
But
Well,
we're kind of new to us, or at least some of them were.
Well, two of the songs actually originate from the Quarrymen rehearsal
exactly.
from 1960. But when you started to actually perform your own original material, was that at the Fest for Beatle fans, or how did that actually start, and what was the reaction?
Where did we actually start performing our original songs?
Well, we had this album, right? We made this. Marty Scott of Gem Records approached us and said, "I want to put out a record of you guys."
Right.
Because at first we were just going to make a little record that we.
Well, we did a live rehearsal. We do that often. When we're going to do a show, before we do the show, we'll do a rehearsal at a small venue, and we'll rehearse in front of people because it's a better way of kind of cementing the material into your head. And so we did the same thing prior to going into the studio to record the first record. We had a live rehearsal. So we actually were performing our original material and the Beatles material at the rehearsal.
Yeah, we were just getting ready for our first album.
Right.
And Marty Scott signed us to his label. And so, yeah, it was always a part of it. Zeke and I have written songs for a number of artists, and we've been successful together and separately on a lot of big, records out there, charting records on big record labels. And so we've always, for 30 years now, we've been collaborators. So when we got together to play Beatles songs, it was for fun. The band has always been for fun, but writing a song that is inspired by the whole Beatles style was our self-assignment. And,
it was really fun thing to do.
And it still is. It's a great thing. Instead of us trying to sound modern, we're digging back to the music that woke us up as children,
Yeah.
Okay, before I pass you along to another member of the panel here, I was just reminded of how Paul McCartney once said that to write a Chuck Berry song is not as easy as it sounds. You might think it's just 3 chords, but it's far more difficult than you realize. When you're trying to do something that sounds Beatlesque, do you find it easy or is it challenging?
It's getting easier. Zeke has become, it's very easier for him, but it is hard. And I remember having this conversation early on when we first started writing.
Yeah.
Writing, for songwriters, ballads come very easily.
Yeah. Ballads, every songwriter will tell you that the ballads are easy to write, but we're trying to write almost all up-tempo rockers. Yeah. Which is what the Beatles did in the early days.
They were a rock band.
They were definitely a rock band. Yeah. They were definitely a dance band. As for the difficulty, one of the things that makes it less difficult is the fact that it's so much fun. When you come up with a song and you're trying to figure out. We've been studying the Beatles for years, and so putting all that knowledge that we've gained to use is fun, and then to actually come up with something that sounds like it. Or what would they do here? What do they do here? It's just a lot of fun, and so it makes it easier.
Okay. Al, how about you?
just wanted to get a feel for. Now, I'm assuming, even though you both have been in the business for 30 years or more, can I assume that neither one of you had ever recorded in Studio 2 at Abbey Road?
That's correct.
Okay. Give me an idea of how that felt that first day walking into that studio. Now, I know you had done some prep work, consulting with Ken Scott, among others, and having original equipment moved in. But give us an idea of how that felt that first day walking into Studio 2.
Well, when Dorothy walked into the Emerald City for the first time, that's what it was like.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It was beautiful. It's real bucket list stuff. Just the whole concept was like everybody got lit up when we realized, we can do this. We can do this, and also, walking into that space, it is very familiar to people like you guys and us. You see it. You've seen it a million times. You know it. Visually, you know it really well. But this was like ours.
Yeah, it's different when you get there too.
Yeah.
When you're actually there. I mean, I've seen pictures, but it reminded me of the first time I saw it, only time I saw the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Again, an iconic thing that I'd seen my whole life, but when I actually saw it in person, right in front of me, it took my breath away. And being in Studio One took my breath away. Same way.
Kind of reminded me of when I met McCartney. But we both met McCartney separately. Zeke played with him. But I was having this conversation with this guy. Right. And I'm looking at his face. And I'm like, here's a guy that I've watched him. I know that face inside out. He's like a member of my family, but he's never even laid eyes on me.
No. Right.
But it's this incredible familiarity. It was kind of like that, like walking into, and we were home, and for us to lock that place out for a number of days and do what we came to do and record our own music along with Beatle music was just a dream come true. And we
were home. We were definitely home. And when we had to leave, we were so sad. We were like,
I bet.
I don't want to leave. I want to stay.
And you got to use some actual equipment, not only the audio equipment, but also some of the pianos that they actually used on Beatles recordings.
We did. When Lefty sat down at the Steinway upright and he played the final chord of The Day in the Life, and you heard it reverberating in that room, those overtones, that sound, that piano, you said, oh my God. It's a eureka thing. That's it.
Yeah, all heads turn and jaws drop.
Yeah, it's like, wow. Oh my God, that's it.
You hear it when you're standing there.
You don't have to have anybody tell you that's the piano they used. Right. Nobody has to say a word. You just hear it.
But yes, we did. You know what? What a great studio. They were very accommodating. We contacted them before. It was Alan Parsons that suggested we work with Toby Hulbert, who was our engineer. He's an Abbey Road staff engineer, but he's a young guy that's really into everything, retro and vintage and stuff like that. Interestingly enough, Abbey Road does not do that many retro projects. They predominantly do soundtracks and stuff.
Yeah, they don't do projects of us going in and recording the way we recorded, which was like the early Beatles. It was very novel to them. They were excited because they never get to do it.
And we had contacted them in advance. And we asked for, listen, guys, we want all the old stuff, whatever you got, whatever left old gear you got. And so they wheeled in these very old desks, these very old consoles. And one of them was used on the Abbey Road album. Right. And the other one was a red console, of which there's only a handful in the world. And
that was a custom console made for EMI. So only EMI studios had them.
So we were using old gear and set up the way the Beatles set up, and we were in search of some kind of magic mojo or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, was there kind of a magic mojo in the air?
Yeah.
Is it on the record?
It sounds like it.
It does sound like it.
Yeah, it was great for us. It was a wonderful experience, and
there was magic mojo in the air. Yeah. It was. Every time you walk out of the control room, look down in the room, and you can feel it. You look at that view, which is beautiful, and it, yeah, absolutely.
It's a real bucket list thing, but we also had a job to do. We weren't tourists. We paid good money to record in Abbey Road, specifically that studio. And, so you'd flip back and forth between, oh my God, here we are. And wait a minute, we got to do another take. We can do that song better. So we did, for the most part, we worked very hard to make this record while having the time of our lives.
Absolutely. And before I pass you over to Alan, I just wanted to make a comment about that, because despite the fact that, obviously the Beatles are the overriding influence, this wasn't like, it doesn't sound like just, a band, a Beatle band in Studio 2. It doesn't sound like, say, one of the Rain bands or 1964, the Tribute, going into Studio 2 and trying to be the Beatles. There are other influences here. I mean, I was hearing the Rockpile and the Raspberries and a lot of Scotty Moore from Rocky's guitar work. So obviously there was more than just the Beatles' influence in the air.
Well, and also, if you really want to play like the Beatles, you can't play like the Beatles. You have to play more like the Beatles' influences.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So Scotty Moore was a big influence in George Harrison. So if you really want to get in their head, you have to go back to their influences.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Berry and Elvis and all those, Buddy Holly, all those guys.
Yeah.
Little Richard, the whole bunch. So we were, when we were working the material out, we were thinking of that ttoo. We weren't just thinking about the Beatles.
Yeah, and we're not really trying to sing like the Beatles. We don't sing with British accents or any of that. We're being adults about this.
Yes.
Well,
Very much so.
We are limiting ourselves to basically the instrumentation, though. Most of the record is two guitars, bass, and drums, and then there's some keyboards, piano thrown in a few tracks. So we're like Lefty said, when we had done a lot of Beatle albums for shows, the later albums, the White Album. We did the whole White Album. We did Sgt. Pepper's, all those things, Revolver, which requires orchestration and a lot of overdubs on the records and a lot of multiple guitar parts. When we went back for this one particular show, it was called Birth of the Beatles, and did the first two records, we realized how great they were and how great those recordings were. They were done with four guys, because we worked the parts out, and then we said, well, we don't need to add anything else. We've got everything done. And so that's when we realized we could do that, and that's what we try to do in the studio as well.
Absolutely. Alan?
Okay, you mentioned having the old equipment and going for that feel. I was wondering what you did in terms of recording techniques, because as you know, the Beatles early on would do live in the studio, live vocals, all of that stuff, and it was only sort of later they began overdubbing, and Ringo was sitting in the corner learning how to play chess. How did you do it?
Well, to be honest, our first album, we were much truer to recording absolutely live. There were songs where, we're singing together on one mic next to the drummer, and then for mixing purposes, that's pretty,
pretty challenging.
Challenging,
yeah. So we did record everything live, all the rhythm tracks live, and we did a live vocal along with what we recorded. And then for this album, and then after we had that down, then we did go back and overdub the vocals again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did some cleaning up, So here's the way we like to think of it. Our first album, Monophonic, was kind of like the first, with the Beatles and Please Please Me. Whereas this second album is a little bit later. It's a little bit something in between Beatles for Sale, Hard Day's Night, and let's say Rubber Soul.
A little bit of Rubber Soul.
We kind of got our foot into Rubber Soul, So we did get I'm playing piano on one or two songs, and we're stretching out just a little bit, but it's still a rock and roll album, I think.
Mm-hmm. So if you were using, I guess, the Abbey Road console, you probably record it to Pro Tools, right? So it doesn't matter how many tracks. You can always have more tracks, but the console was an 8-track console, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both consoles at the same time. we used the Abbey Road console and the Red console at the same time.
That's true. That was more.
So there was more, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In terms of the material, and particularly the Beatles songs at the end of the album, basically all of those except for "Love of the Loved," which was a Finnish song that people did, including the Beatles on the Decca audition. Some of these were really pretty unfinished songs as we heard them on either the Quarrymen tape or, I guess because I know, is from the Get Back, Let It Be sessions. But they were just sort of like walking through them and not doing finished takes, and the songs were kind of, we don't know what the whole song was. So you had to do some extrapolation, I think, right? What was the process of finishing these off?
Well, first of all, I want to mention that when Zeke met Paul McCartney at a party at John Bon Jovi's backyard, and Paul got up to play with him, Zeke asked Paul, well, now what is this about? Like you and John have like 100 songs that you didn't record.
Right. Yeah.
And
he says, well, we exaggerated that. I said, you didn't have that many? He goes, no. I says, how many? He goes, well, I don't know. I says, did you have 10? He says, yeah, we had at least 10. I said, do you remember them? And he started singing them to me in my face. It was really bizarre. He put his face in my face and he was singing these songs, and I'm like, yikes. But
did you put your iPhone on record, or?
No, this was like 9 years ago, and they didn't have an iPhone.
Well, did he say something about the quality? He said they weren't that great?
Yeah, he said the songs weren't good. I said, why don't you record those songs? You kind of owe it to posterity. And he says, well, they're not very good.
Yeah, which is interesting. And so here we are 10 years later, and we're digging out these songs, and there are things missing, and there are ingredients that could be added to really flesh out, I should say.
Yeah.
And make more of it. And it reminds me of like when someone wants to make an old painting and update it and redo it. And there's pieces of the painting missing, but you have to kind of fill it in. You have to decide what color that the artist originally meant in this painting. And, when you renovate a theater, you have to do all these things. If there's fixtures missing, you have to find a fixture that seems to work for that
in the right
structure.
period.
Yeah. So that we kind of did a lot of that. We were filling in a few holes that they left.
For sure. And one of the things that distinguishes us from other Beatle type bands is that we were songwriters first. And so it's not a question of us just going in and copying a record like a lot of bands try to do. And we've done that too. But we look at these songs and then we step back and say, well, what if I wrote that song? What would I do with it? Because when you first write a song, that's basically all it is a melody and chords, and you don't have all the arrangements. So and the Weekings are really good at I think at coming up with arrangements. We sit around and hammer them out. So we just took the songs and started playing with them until they started to sound like what we wanted them to sound like.
Mm-hmm. Did you, when you finished it, did you run it by McCartney? I guess would be the only one who is decisive here, seeing as they're his compositions. Did you run it past them or send them a copy for soliciting comment or anything?
You will not answer our calls.
We were kind of hoping you did that.
Yeah, we were hoping.
I see.
We did actually. There's the one Now and Then song that we looked at for a second, because I'm sure you guys know that one, and it was one of the ones that the three living Beatles began work on for the anthology album. And we started working on it, but that one we had to reach out.
It's not published. Yeah, we reached out to Yoko's lawyer,
because technically I think it's John's song.
Yeah, right. And it's not, that song is not published, so you can't get the rights. You'd have to get permission directly from Yoko.
Right.
And the lawyer declined to give us permission, so we dropped that.
Okay. So over to Steve.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list here of the songs. I mean, the two of the songs. Well, one of the songs, "Love of the Love," everybody knows from the Decca auditions, and "You Must Write," and "Some Days," I believe, are both Quarrymen. Where did "Because I Know" come from?
It's on the Fly on the Wall record. I Let It Be Fly on the Wall.
Oh, okay.
Also, I think the Black album.
Oh, okay, okay. How did you get the permission to record there? I mean, that seems like not that not that every band is going to be able to do that, but I mean, was it a major process to do that?
To record those songs?
Well, I mean, no, to get permission to record there.
Oh, at Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Well, we pulled a couple strings, but at the end of the day, they do like to accept the money that you give them to use.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
What was your schedule like there when you were working? How long did it take you to get to? How many days were you there, and what was the schedule like when you were there?
We were in London for a week. It was an interesting several days. The first day we got there, Bruce Springsteen was playing at Wembley Stadium. And found out about that through a fan. So
yeah, right.
Yeah, Rich told us about that,
and so I reached out to Max because we know Max pretty well, and Max Weinberg, and he said,
get us in.
Yeah, so he brought us in, and we got to see the show.
So our first day there, we went to see Bruce Springsteen, which was pretty cool at Wembley, and then the second day we hooked up with Ken Scott.
Yeah,
and he was doing a reading, a playing of David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust album because it was the anniversary of the date where Bowie decided to quit being Ziggy Stardust, and it was at the hotel where he made that decision, where it all happened. So that's where we met Ken Scott. We spent a big part of the day doing that. The next day we had a rehearsal. We rented a rehearsal hall because we wanted to go over everything again. And then we had 2 full days in Abbey Road, and
we recorded 16 songs in 2 days. So we spent both days. We locked out, with our room.
They were 10-hour days, and
and we plowed through though. We
did all the rhythm tracks for all 16 songs on the first day.
Yeah, first day.
One day.
We were well rehearsed because we wanted to, if you're spending top dollar, because it's a world-class studio.
Totally.
And it continues to be. So if you're going to spend that kind of money, we wanted to be prepared. So we were well rehearsed, and we plowed right through.
And not only did we do 16 songs, we did at least 3 or 4 takes of each song.
Oh.
So we really recorded 48 songs in one day. And the engineer, Toby, who was just a prince of a guy, I told him in the morning, I said, we're going to do 16 songs today. And he looked at me like I had 2 heads. And then at the end of the day, I said, you didn't think we could do it, did you? He goes, I didn't know how good you guys were.
So there's enough for another for outtake albums.
There's 4 extras, right?
Yeah, right.
Because there's 12 on the album.
Right. Here you go.
It'll be on the next record.
Did you find? I mean, there's been. I've heard this before, and you could probably confirm it better than anybody else could. That there is an actual sound specific to the studio. Is that correct?
Every room has its own sound, so it is correct. Sure, it sounds like that room. And like I said, when Lefty played the piano chord, I don't think it would have sounded as much like A Day in the Life had it not been in that room, because it was the right piano in the right room.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, as far as going into another studio and say if you had done this in another studio, would it have sounded different than it did there?
Listen to our first record.
Yeah,
because
which I did.
Mm-hmm. Our first record was done with the same process. I mean, we went in the studio and recorded it live.
Okay.
So, is it sound the same? No. Happy Girlfriend sounds different.
You know what? I have to say I did learn from this process, and in retrospect, does Dark Side of the Moon sound anything like a Beatle record? There are.
It's got a vibe. I think it has a vibe.
Well, there's a vibe, but does it sound like the Beatles? Like, does playing a Hofner bass make you sound like Paul McCartney? I mean, there's a number of things that you could point to. I mean, I know that personally, I've picked up I picked up Jeff Beck's guitar one time, and just the tone that he gets out of it is completely different than the tone that I get out of it.
No, for sure.
So it is definitely how you use it and who's playing it. But definitely each studio has its own set of acoustics and sounds, and the chain.
The chain is important. The equipment chain is important. We're going into the vintage mics, going through the vintage boards. That adds to the sound. That changes the sound radically. And you're definitely going to hear that.
I will add that this is our second album is mono again, and mono is it's a challenge. It's very different than the way we were brought up, making records and recordings. It's a whole different thing. It's difficult to fit everything in that same space, whereas it's a lot easier to kind of, we put this over here, put that over there. But to get it all to sound right coming out of a single source is it's a vintage kind of sound. It's a retro kind of sound. It's the way records used to be made.
You have to use a different means of separating the instruments. You can't separate them spatially with stereo like you do with stereo. You have to separate them by their frequency content. So you filter different instruments, say this is in this frequency range, this is in this frequency range, and you mix it that way, which is new for me. Great.
Yeah, great. Also that studio has something like 800 vintage microphones. These really old.
I was gonna ask you how much vintage equipment is still in there.
A lot of microphones. They have a guy whose whole job every day is to take care of those vintage mics.
Yeah.
He's got new old stock tubes that go in those things. Where he got it, who knows? And that's what he does, is maintain those microphones.
For me, particularly, I was excited to be using the Fairchild limiters, which were the compressors that the Beatles used on all their records, and we used 2 of them, right? Mm-hmm. And those things were famous for blowing up and being difficult, but that is the sound on the Beatle mixes and stuff like that. When the compression was, these old Fairchild limiters, which, they're not made anymore. And these guys were these ancient pieces of equipment. Plus, we had other compressors as well. But for me, it was just the thrill of having the signal chain go through some of that World War II technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Mics from the 40s, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Ken, back to you.
This is fascinating stuff. I want to go back to the songs You Must Write in Some Days. Earlier, you revealed to me that these songs were copywritten. And because of the fact that the Beatles never released it, and I don't know of anybody else that ever recorded them until you guys did, I would have thought that they weren't copywritten at all. What was the process like in trying to find out if the songs were copywritten? And did you uncover other songs along the way that were Lennon-McCartney songs that maybe you didn't even know about?
Answer to the second question is no. But the answer to the first question, it was surprisingly easy. When you want to do a cover of a song, you need to license it. So the copywriting, by the way, occurs whenever you put something down in Medium. It's automatically protected by copyright, even if you don't register the copyright with the Copyright Office. So everything is copyrighted. But whether it's registered, that's a different matter. These items were definitely registered, and they're definitely published, and you can license them from Harry Fox Agency. So all we did is go in Harry Fox Agency and do a search, and the songs popped up. It was actually easier than you might think.
Were there other songs? I know you mentioned Now and Then. Were there other songs that you were considering? Because you were really going for the rare here. Rarer than the first album.
To be honest, in looking for Beatles songs that they didn't record, there really aren't that many. And what they did is, as they progressed in their 7-year recording history, they started to use everything they wrote or came close to it. For instance, the song Not Guilty might have popped up, later for the anthology.
Well, Not Guilty, Harrison recorded that on one of his solo records, too.
Oh, yeah, and he did.
Right.
Right.
But, for the most part, most of the things they wrote, they cut later on in their career, in the second half of their career. But early on, when they were young guys, there were a few of these leftover songs that they didn't, they just didn't flesh out, they didn't include. So there's a few of those, but nevertheless, they're getting harder and harder for us to find material that we really love of theirs. that nobody knows, put it that way.
Well, yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to do for the third record what we did on this one, to find these songs that nobody knows or nobody's ever cut before. So, which is why we're really happy we did it at Abbey Road, because we think we did it right. If you're going to do it, that's the place to do it. But yeah, there's not a treasure trove of unknown songs. When we became aware of You Must Write, and some days by reading Mark Lewison's book, that's how I became aware of it. And then I trolled around to find that the songs actually did exist. The demo did actually exist. There was another song mentioned in that book, and I can't think of it right now. But it was only a title. We don't have the music. All we know is the title of the song. So
Can't find it.
We may write a song with that title. Just
Although maybe these guys would be able to find it.
maybe.
Could be Winston's Walk or Pinwheel Twist.
I mean,
Yeah, really.
I mean, if we take the title and work the song out, it's not going to sound like the other song, and it can't be plagiarism. But
What's the song?
I forget. I got to look it up. I can't forget the title. I forget the title.
I'd like to
It was
mention.
kind of cool though.
We do something throughout the record, both records, really. If it's a Lennon McCartney or Harrison song or one of our own, we drop these little Easter eggs, we call them.
Yes.
And that is, little ideas, little arrangement things that harken back to familiar Beatle quotes, but some of them you have to be listening really close to find them. And the other day and it happens in almost every song at least once.
Oh yeah, every song's got Easter eggs.
Yeah, so it's kind of a fun little thing. It's fun for us, and I would like to think it's fun for the listener to oh, wait a minute, doesn't that sound like, really fun for us. It's like there's a bit of a puzzle to all this for us, and that helps make it it's a fun game we're doing,
In fact, Love of the Loved is a big Easter egg. I don't know how much you want to, reveal. Let people hear the album.
Which part of it do you think is an Easter egg?
You can reveal.
I would say the whole thing.
Well, the song itself, was Cilla Black's is the version that I know. Although there's, but we kind of did we looked at it a bit like Because. Mm. We said, well, let's do this song like Because, like the Beatles Because, as opposed to the Dave Clark 5 Because. But just the thing. Let's lay heavily on 3-part vocals and very little instrumentation and let it sit there. You might say that's an Easter egg, but there's some other quotations.
That's not really an Easter egg because somebody might hear it and say, oh, well, that's a similar approach to Because, but it doesn't sound like Because. But
no, I know
the big Easter egg is before the song, right?
Yes.
That's what you're really talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's how we get into that song.
Uh-huh.
Is a big Easter egg. You chuckle knowingly.
Yes.
Well, the cool thing is, I'm sure you guys know that the end of the Abbey Road album was originally in the middle of the medley, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Her Majesty and the chord you're talking about was in the middle after
Me and Mr.
Mustard. So Me and Mr. Mustard ends with that chord. And you can actually take it and splice it back together the way it was originally to hear what it would have sounded like. So that's how we created the sound. Was we played Me, Mr. Mustard, including the final chord. We did, and because there was some doubt on our parts as to whether we could actually reproduce that sound.
Yeah.
And and have it really be credible to sound like the end of Abbey Road. And so we played Me, Mr. Mustard up through the whole ending of it, and then we took and we edited off the whole of the song except for the last chord, and lo and behold, you heard it.
we had this opportunity. We're standing in Abbey Road Studio 2, and we had an opportunity to try some of these infamous moments on Beatle records. We played the Hard Day's Night, the opening to Hard Day's Night. And
it's not on this record. Don't look for it.
But if you look carefully, you will hear the final chord of Day in the Life on this record. And we were in there. It's just like, oh, let's try this. How'd they get that? We've studied the music so well. We know the nuance. We know the voicing of each guitar part and all of that. What octave the bass note is in. Let's try these things. And so that's kind of how we got to the the Easter egg for Love of the Love.
So what you're saying in a way is that one of the 4 missing songs that's not on this album is Mean Mr. Mustard.
No, we're not saying that at all.
So then there are really 5 missing songs.
Well, we didn't count that. Yeah, I guess you could say that. We're not going to do anything with the
Okay.
first part of Me, Mr. Mustard.
There's a slight difference between just hitting a chord or it being
I think it's a big
a
difference.
splice.
I think it's more than a slight difference.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have sounded like it if you hadn't cut it.
Yes, it's a difference. So we said, well, let's play the last chorus of "He's a Dirty Old Man."
Right. That's all we played was the last chorus.
Dirty old man.
Down, down, down,
Bang.
bang.
There you go. You mentioned Ken Scott and Alan Parsons before. Aside from recommending the producer for this album, did they give any kind of guidance in recording there at Abbey Road?
Not a whole lot. Ken Scott was he was very adamant about the compressors, which compressors to use, and he was cool. We talked to him at length about it. And Alan Parsons, I actually kind of do gigs. I'm on double gigs with him sometimes in another band, and so he strongly suggested Toby, which was a really good idea. And in talking to both these guys, we get the vibe, and we drop our ideas and see how they reacted and stuff like that. To be honest, did they want to be the guys to recreate a Beatles sound? No. They've moved on to other things, of course, and and they've probably been approached by other people before, and I don't blame them. They've got their own records to do.
Yeah.
Zeke,
did you say before that you worked with Paul McCartney? I know you mentioned
I didn't work
Paul
with them.
saying.
I was asked to provide a band for a party at John Bon Jovi's house, and there were a bunch of celebrities there. Billy Joel, Roger Waters, Jimmy Buffett, and Bon Jovi. Bruce Springsteen was there. And Paul McCartney was there. And Paul McCartney and some of the other guys sat in with us and played for about an hour. And then afterward, I got to meet him and talk to him, hang out. So it was that was my working relationship, but it was fantastic. And I'm one of the best nights of my life was hanging out with Paul.
I can imagine. Al?
Lest anybody think that this album is all Lennon-McCartney songs, actually, unlike the first album, which was, I guess, about evenly split between the Lennon-McCartney songs and originals, actually, probably 2/3 of this album is actually originals.
Right.
And, again, stylistically all over the place.
Well, with the first record, we were kind of playing this game. We mixed the songs up in the order of the record, so that we were playing a game of if the casual listener could tell which songs were written by the Beatles, which ones were written by us, and most people couldn't tell unless you were already familiar with the songs. We took a different approach on this record. We said, okay, we're done with that. We put the 4 Beatle tracks at the end of the record as bonus tracks. And then the main part of the first part of the album is all ours. So we wanted to distinguish the two. Say, okay, we want you to know which ones we did.
Although, would you say that that You're the One, which is the one song that Rocky wrote with you,
right,
is kind of the Ringo song on this album?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
Not at all. It's his inspiration for that song was "You Like Me Too Much" by George Harrison. But
okay.
In that middle period, George was very country influenced, and Ringo was country influenced. So that's what you're hearing there. But it's really more George than Ringo.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree though with Al that to me, when they went through their Buck Owens phase,
yes,
I think of Ringo for some reason, even though clearly he didn't sing all the, I Don't Want to Spoil the Party and all these other things.
No, he sang Act Natural.
But Act Naturally was the
and
one
what
that
goes
sticks.
On. What Goes On.
Yeah. But but Rocky is our illustrious guitar player, not our drummer.
Yes, right, exactly. And of the originals, are there any particular ones that, for you are favorites?
Well, the ones that were really kind of put that the record label has chosen to push would be Don't Know, Don't Care and Little Elvis.
Oh, yeah.
But personally, I mean, we
I'm
might differ
kinda-
on this. Love Can.
No,
is
I'm
one
kind
of
of
my
gravitating
favorites.
toward Love Can too.
Yeah, Love Can I love, and I like Love of the Loved too.
Hmm.
I like them all. I'm proud of the record.
You should be.
Have you guys thought about the next one? What you might do for the next one?
Yeah, thought a lot about it. Well, as we pointed out, we recorded part of it already.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, and we're not really young guys, so we figured let's make a plan. Let's get this stuff done before one of us has like a stroke or something.
So what are you guys going to be doing to promote it? I mean, are you gonna do any special gigs or any special appearances or?
We're having a record release concert at the House of Independence in Asbury Park on November 11th.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be at Daryl's house on January
something.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
And I should be giving away tickets for that.
That would be great.
That's nice.
That would be great.
Yeah, we might be. We're talking about recording possibly a live album.
At Daryl.
Yeah, at Daryl's.
Oh, wow.
And that's January 21.
And that would be in between the next album and this album. So the album with the songs that you haven't heard yet, the live album would not have any of that stuff on it. It would be something else.
Yeah, we might do this a live album as our next record, quickly followed by a fourth studio album. That's just how ambitious we are.
Yeah.
Of
Guys,
the four new songs, not the four new songs, but the four unused songs, were they all originals, or are there any, again, little Lennon McCartney nuggets?
They're all original.
Aha, okay.
They're all original, and they sound later, like later Beatles sound.
Ah,
Okay.
interesting.
Okay. Any
question?
I was just gonna. Let me just ask: Are any? You guys are predominantly on the East Coast. Any chance you get out this way and on the West Coast?
Nothing's impossible. We'll have to. It'll have to make sense financially to do that.
Sure.
How about Pittsburgh?
Zeke is from Erie, PA,
Yeah.
which is near.
Oh, okay. I know Erie very well.
Yeah, I grew up 100 miles north of Pittsburgh, so
Okay, then you know the turf.
I do.
Yeah, and there's a couple of really nice theaters in Pittsburgh.
I'm actually really good friends with Johnny Iris and their band.
Oh
They're
yeah,
popular in Pittsburgh. So.
yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I've been to a lot of shows at Daryl's house. Why are you picking that particular venue to do a live show? It's a wonderful place, and I love the sound there. But I know you played there already.
Yeah, it's an intimate place. It's small, and it looks like it's a log cabin basically, but it is wired for sound, and there is a little control room off to the side that the audience doesn't get to see that is packed with state-of-the-art digital recording gear, and it's really, really impressive. And when we played there in the past, we've gotten some really good recordings.
We've got multi-track recordings from playing there in the past, so it's all set up to do it already. It won't cost us very much, so it only makes sense.
Very good.
Cool.
You're also doing a charity show for
Lyrics for Lucas. So
Lyrics for Lucas. What's that about?
It's a charity for a little boy, I believe, with health problems, and we're helping out.
Yeah, Wednesday the 26th at the Starland Ballroom.
Right.
And occasionally we just did a charity last Saturday night.
Right, for Special People United to Ride, SPUR, which is their an equestrian group where they have the special kids to teach them how to ride horses and have a lot of fun. So.
And we also that was 2 Saturdays ago. This past Saturday night we played in Hoboken at Maxwell's.
Yeah, a club called Maxwell's, kind of a famous venue.
Mm-hmm. I thought Maxwell's closed.
So did we, but it
reopened.
Reopened instantly.
It didn't take. Yeah, I covered its closing night. What's it still doing there?
I think. Well, I hadn't been there in a few years, but I think it had been renovated, cleaned up.
Yeah,
it was in good shape.
Yeah,
and we had a really fun time, and it was a beautiful night. There's beautiful weather here on the East Coast right now, and I took a drive out to look at the Hudson, and I was trying to, while I was driving, I was trying to Google, where Frank Sinatra grew up. I'm looking for because that's Hoboken, man. But I couldn't.
Right. I don't know if that's a Sinatra venue. I was curious if it was a Sinatra venue.
Who knows?
Or is it
Probably not.
Maxwell's, I doubt it.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Not the kind of room, actually.
But this
Sorry.
thing that we did recording at Studio 2, which we named our album Studio 2 about, Studio 2 at Abbey Road. This is one of my bucket list things, that there are still a number of working studios that are historic, legendary studios that still exist, as well as there's some venues out there. I mean, I played Buddy Holly's final concert was in Clear Lake, Iowa. I played at that place. But someday the Weekings, possibly we're going to record at Chess in Chicago, one in Memphis. These places still some of them still exist, and so that's But for this record at this time, it was such a thrill recording at Studio 2 at Abbey Road, and so that's why we decided to name the album that.
Mm-hmm. Capitol Studios is another one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's interested in this charity show, Lyrics for Lucas, you said it's at the
Starland Ballroom.
right. That's in Sayreville, New Jersey,
Correct.
on October the 26th.
26. Thank you. Yeah.
Where can people get your album besides? I know I saw it listed on Amazon today. Where can people get it besides there?
It's going to be released on November 18.
Right. It'll be in stores all over. You can buy it in record stores.
Amazon or record stores.
Yeah, I don't know what other online outlets there are for it besides Amazon.
How does one buy records anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
You doing a vinyl edition?
There is a
Yeah,
vinyl
yeah,
edition, and oddly enough, on this one, there is a cassette version.
No.
Because
Oh, really?
there is an argument that cassettes are having some kind of comeback, so we
I
are
just-
available on cassette.
I just bought a one of those Crosley all-in-one things with the turntable and a CD player and all, and there is on the side a cassette player.
Wow.
It's a recording medium. Cassettes are actually very hardy. I just moved. We're in a new place, and I've got boxes of cassettes, and a lot of them are like old songwriting ideas of ours.
Yeah.
And right now I don't really have a cassette player, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to buy a cassette player to listen to this.
I got an extra one here.
Yeah, I'll borrow yours. Yeah.
That's fun.
The song we were talking about is called "Keep Looking That Way."
Oh, yeah. Right.
Ooh.
Do you think you've ever heard it?
Haven't heard
I've
it.
heard of it. I've never heard the song.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody has. So,
We've become forensic Beatle guys.
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah.
and seriously, if you guys become aware of anything that we're not aware of, we'd appreciate hearing it.
yeah.
Yeah, we still need to learn Pinwheel Twist and how that goes, and Just Fun.
You've also got all of those, there were a lot of solo things that they wrote individually and gave to other people,
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of things there you could tap into.
But we may do something different also. We're toying with the idea of taking some songs that are not unknown or that are well known and doing our own spin on them. That's another. So.
The other thing too, as we are a quartet, we are really a power pop band. We're not a Beatles tribute, and like I said, we're not wig wearing guys. We're serious musicians, good players, solid players, but it's really the genre of power pop that the Beatles invented and that we are kind of about. So, we're also looking at that too. It's like you mentioned the Raspberries and Rockpile, and those are great power pop bands, Cheap Trick, even Jellyfish. I mean, there's a number of tremendous power pop bands and great material out there. So we can perhaps touch on that early Tom Lundgren or something, or just continue to do what we do and have fun doing it.
And the Raspberries were a big influence for me coming up because they're from Cleveland and I was from Erie, so I used to go see them play when they were playing clubs. And they did kind of what we're doing. They played original songs and Beatles songs. Doing Get Back, and they were doing it. It was great. You know, I was amazed, and so I was kind of wanted to do what they did. So here we are. Nice. Did
you see them when they reunited a couple of times?
No, I just saw them back in the day.
Oh, okay.
Wally Bryson is Wally Bryson?
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah. So you also have a website, correct?
Yes. www.weeklings.com. WEEKLINGS.
And that's a good way to get in touch with you.
Facebook page. Yeah, you can get in touch with us on the website or Facebook, either one.
We're easily approachable.
Yeah.
I just want to say a shout out to our band members, Rocky and Smokestack, as well as Marty Scott, our manager, Sammy Boyd, and Franco and Maureen, our publicity department, who probably hooked us up with you guys.
Absolutely.
Yes, they did. Yep, they did.
Well, Lefty and Zeek, this has been so much fun, and we wish you much success with the new album, Studio 2.
Mm-hmm.
And also investigate the first album also.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
If you want to get in touch with us, our email address is thingswesaidtoday@gmail.com. We also have our own Facebook page, Things We Said Today. If you want to get in touch with Steve, why don't you tell the folks how they can do that?
BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com. I also have my own personal Facebook page, and I have a Beatles news group called Beatles News and Commentary, where we talk about this show, and we talk about all sorts of fun things.
Okay. Alan, how about you?
You can get to me through Alan Cozen on Facebook or Alan Cozen Remixed. Maybe I should start an Alan Cozen mono page.
There you go.
Yeah.
But we'll go with Remix for the moment. So, yeah, that's it.
Lefty and Zeek will be immediate fans of that Facebook page.
No question.
Love that mono.
Yep.
Al, how about you?
On Facebook at Al Sussman, on Twitter at ASUSS49, or through www.beatlefan.com for Beatlefan Magazine.
And as for me, Ken Michaels, my email address is everylittlething@att.net. You should also check out my website, kenmichaelsradio.com, for weekly Beatles trivia, great prizes I give away, and lots of interviews, including a new one with these same two guys, with Lefty and Zeek, which will be on my website probably by the time the show airs.
So what did you guys tell Ken that you didn't tell us? Just kidding.
You'll have to listen on my website.
Okay.
There were a few things. We repeated ourselves a little bit, but I thought there were some extras.
All right, Lefty and Zeek, thanks so much for joining us.
Welcome.
And for Steve, Al, Alan, Lefty and Zeek, this is Ken Michaels saying thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.